It's time for salah and you're at work and you have your headscarf on. And as a Muslim woman, every time you make wudu at the workplace, you have to take off the headscarf, you have to unpin it, then you have to make wudu, then you have to put it back on again. And it takes you a very long time, whereas the Muslim brothers at work, they just have to take 1 minute just to make their wudu. And you think to yourself, do I really have to do this? Is it okay for me to wipe over my headscarf? If brothers can wipe over a turban, why can't I wipe over my headscarf? Isn't Islam supposed to be easy? This is a matter where the scholars of the past have some debate. Some scholars, the first group, which is the majority of scholars, they say that it is not allowed for a woman to wipe over the headscarf in wudu. In other words, every time you make wudu, you have to take it off, and then you have to wipe over your head, and then you have to put it back on again. And the reason why they say this is because Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in the Qur'an, وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, to wipe your heads. And if Allah commands us to wipe over the head, if someone wipes over something that is over the head, and not the head itself, that means that they're not fulfilling this command of the Qur'an. But what about turbans? Didn't the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wipe over his turban? Didn't the companions do so as well? The answer is yes. We have a hadith, we have evidence for this, but there's no evidence that the Prophet ﷺ specifically allowed this for women. So these 2 points here are the arguments of the scholars who say it's not allowed for women to wipe over the headscarf. But there is another opinion. Many of the scholars of the past, including Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, and this view was even attributed to Salama radiallahu anha, Al-Hasan al-Basri from the Tabi'in. It's also attributed to Al-Awza'i, Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, and a few other scholars of the past. This is also the view of Ibn Hazm, Dawud ibn Ali from the Zahiri school, and many scholars that came later on, they chose the view that it is okay for women to wipe over their headscarf in wudu. Now, why do they say this? Well, these scholars, they look at the illah, they look at the reasoning behind why it is permissible for men to wipe over the turban. Think about it. Why did the Prophet ﷺ allow the companions to wipe over their turbans? And why did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ do it himself? Well, the illah, the reason here for which the ruling revolves, the illah is to make things easier, is that there is difficulty in removing a turban. And if there's difficulty in removing the turban in wudu, the Prophet ﷺ, he wiped over his turban and he allowed the companions to do so. If this is the reason for why it's permissible to wipe over the turban, then we would say that a woman has even more reason to wipe over her headscarf. Why? Well, if we compare the khimar of a woman, the headscarf of a woman, and especially if it's worn correctly, right? Because we're only talking about if a woman wears in the actual correct way, where it's underneath the chin and it's wrapped around the entire head. If you look at the way that a woman wears her headscarf, and if you look at a turban, you would find that the headscarf completely covers the head, whereas the turban doesn't completely cover the head. And also, the headscarf is much more difficult to remove than a turban. A turban, you just take it off. Whereas for a headscarf, it is pinned, it's wrapped around, and it's very difficult to put it back on. And also, the need of wiping over a headscarf is greater than the need for wiping over a turban, because a person is not required to wear a turban, so a man is not going to wear a turban all the time when he's out. Whereas a woman is required to wear a headscarf, especially if she's going to be around people that are not supposed to be looking at her. So there is more reason, there's more difficulty that a woman would go through if it is not allowed for her to wipe over her headscarf. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he tells us that Islamic rulings are the same for women as they are for men, unless there is specific evidence. This is taught to us by the Prophet ﷺ. There's a hadith reported by Abu Dawud, the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, in which she narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, "An-nisa'u shaqa'iqur rijal," that women are the counterparts of men. So if something is allowed for men to do, if it's permissible for them to wipe over a head covering that is difficult to remove, then similarly it would follow that it is also permissible for women to do this unless we have evidence that makes this exclusive for men. So this principle teaches us that we don't need a specific evidence to tell us that this is okay for women. As long as it's something that is allowed for men, it should be equally allowed for women, unless there is evidence that explicitly makes something that is exclusive for men. In fact, we even have a hadith reported by Imam Muslim in Sahih, the hadith of Bilal radiallahu anhu, where this hadith mentions Bilal, he said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam masaha ala al-khuffayn, he wiped over his socks, wal khimar, and the khimar. Now, the word khimar in the Arabic language means something that yukhammir al-ra's. It's something that is wrapped over the head. It covers the head. And in the Qur'an, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says about the women, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ, and let the women, let them draw their khimars, their head coverings, over their chest area. So this is how a Muslim woman is to wear her khimar. Khimar means a head covering. Khimar linguistically could apply to an imama, to a turban for a man, and it can also apply to a headscarf for a woman. The word khimar is a general head covering. Now, the head covering of a Muslim woman is referred to as the khimar. And I just want to take this moment just to correct a common misconception. A lot of our Muslim sisters, may Allah bless them, they refer to the headscarf as a hijab. And although this is not wrong, but it gives the wrong meaning. It can be very misleading. Why? Because when we say that we have to wear our hijab, a man has a hijab, a woman has a hijab as well. Hijab means covering. Hijab does not mean headscarf. So when a man has to cover from his belly button to his knees, then that is his hijab. That's where he has to cover. Okay? So a headscarf is not hijab. And the reason why this is so misleading is some of our sisters, they think that if I just cover my head, then I'm wearing the hijab, even if my arm's out or my legs out or I'm wearing tight garments. And this is the wrong understanding by the consensus of scholars. The head covering, the more accurate term for it is a khimar. A khimar linguistically means a head covering, and this would apply to a woman's head covering as well. This hadith right here is used by many of these scholars who say that it is okay for a woman to wipe over her khimar. Why? Because the word khimar is literally mentioned in the hadith, even if it's only in reference to a man, meaning the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there's no evidence to say that this is only allowed for men because of that principle that we mentioned earlier on. Now, there is a condition for this being allowed, and that is a Muslim woman wearing the khimar properly. This doesn't apply to a Muslim woman wearing a man's turban. This is a style that some of our sisters have, but that is not a style that is allowed to have. It's not permissible to wear it like this. Why? Because the neck has to be covered as well. So as long as a Muslim woman is wearing the khimar in the correct way, then she can wipe over it instead of having to take it all off and then wipe her head and then put it back on again. So this will make your life much easier. It's a view of many of the great fuqaha of the past, and there is evidence for this. Now, what if a woman says, but I don't want to do this. I feel more comfortable to wipe over my hair. I don't have an issue taking it off. I don't mind wiping over my head and then going through all of that. We say that there's nothing wrong with that. This is totally fine. But what we are saying is that it is permissible to wipe over the head in wudu. You don't have to do it, but it is permissible to do. And whenever there's a rukhsa, whenever there's a concession in our deen, then it is just as good to do it as it is to not do it. So there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ أَن تُؤْتَى رُخَصُهُ كَمَا يُحِبُّ أَن تُؤْتَى عَزَائِمُهُ. That Allah loves when you take His concessions just as He loves for you to do things as He originally legislated them. So, in other words, applying this, we can say that Allah Azza wa Jalla, He loves for you to wipe over your khimar just as He loves for you to wipe over your head. And the same thing goes for wiping over the socks and doing other things in which Allah Azza wa Jalla has made it easy for us. There's an example of this. There's a hadith in Sahih Muslim where Umar radiallahu anhu, he mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in the Quran, when Allah mentions that it's okay for us to shorten the prayers, Allah Azza wa Jalla, he mentions the situation of fear. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he questioned the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that why are we shortening the prayers if Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions a situation of fear in the Quran and we're not in a situation of fear. The Prophet ﷺ, he said to Umar that this is a sadaqah, this is a charity. تَصَدَّقَ اللَّهُ بِهَا عَلَيْكُمْ فَقْبَلُوا صَدَقَتَهُ. This is a charity that Allah has given you, so accept His charity. So whenever Allah makes things easy for us, it is good for us to accept that charity, as the religion is easy, as the Prophet ﷺ teaches us. And that brings us to some of the lessons that we can take away from this. The religion is easy, and there's no need to make it difficult, as long as we're following the proper scholarly guidance. Then we can take the concessions that are granted to us by Allah Azza wa Jalla. And we also see the fairness of the law of Allah Azza wa Jalla, and that is that men and women are equal in every ruling except when there is explicit evidence to isolate one gender as opposed to another. And there's another great principle that the scholars mention, and that is الشريعة لا تفرق بين المتماثلين ولا تجمع بين المختلفين. That the religion of Allah, the law of Allah, it does not differentiate between two things that are the same, nor does it combine between two things that are difficult. We can see that the imama, the turban of a man, and the khimar of a woman should have the same ruling of the permissibility of wiping over them. I hope that answers this question, and inshallah you learned something new. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to make us among those who follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and purify ourselves in the correct way. If you have any other questions, then be sure to include it in the comment section, and inshallah we'll address your questions in upcoming videos. And also don't forget to like and subscribe.